No one ever warns you about the quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping house, or the gentle quiet of a snow-covered morning. I mean the other kind. The dense, woolen quiet that settles over a place when something is listening back. They tell you Birchwood Manor is a haven, a final, gracious port for those whose sails have grown thin. What they don't tell you is that harbors can have things lurking beneath the docks. I ended up at Birchwood not by choice, but by the gentle, inexorable pressure of a life that had slowly shrunk around me. My son, David, called it supported living. The brochure showed smiling silver-haired couples walking sun-dappled paths. The reality was a sprawling Victorian mansion on the forgotten edge of town, all gabled roofs and windows like drowsy eyes, surrounded by woods so deep they seemed to drink the afternoon light. The air always smelled of pine needles and, faintly, of the antiseptic spray they used on the mahogany banisters. My room was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the back where the forest pressed in. The first thing I noticed was the cold. Not a draft, but a settled, stone cold that lived in the walls. You could feel it in your teeth. Mrs. Harlow, the director, a woman with a smile as fixed as a porcelain doll's, said it was the old building's character. She gave me extra blankets. The second thing was the door. Every door at Birchwood, heavy, oak things with old-fashioned keyholes, had a new, sleek silver deadbolt installed about a foot above the knob. At precisely 9 p.m., you'd hear a series of solid clunks echo down the hall as they were engaged from the outside. For our safety, they said. To prevent confusion. Mrs. Harlow's smile never wavered when she explained it. We just want to ensure no one has a sleepy accident on the stairs, Arthur. I've never been a confused man. Lonely, yes. Achy, certainly. But my mind was, and is, a clear, if somewhat dusty, attic. I knew the lock's purpose wasn't kindness. It was containment. The third thing was the humming. It started my second week. Just after lights out, when the last orderly's footsteps had faded. A low, resonant hum, so deep it was more a vibration in the floorboards than a sound. It came up through the bed frame and into my bones. It lasted exactly 17 minutes, I timed it. Then, silence, deeper than before. I asked old Ben from down the hall about it over lukewarm oatmeal the next morning. He just shook his head, his milky eyes avoiding mine. Don't ask about the furnace, Artie, he mumbled. Just don't. They don't like it. They who? But he just went back to pushing his porridge around the bowl. The staff at Birchwood were uniformly pleasant and uniformly vacant. Their eyes never quite met yours, they always focused on a spot just over your shoulder. They moved with a quiet efficiency, changing sheets, delivering pills, guiding shuffling residents to activities like reminiscence therapy and gentle chair yoga. They were like friendly ghosts. Except for Mr. Clay. Mr. Clay was the head orderly. He wasn't like the others. He was a block of a man, with thick, strong hands and a gaze that didn't wander. His eyes were the color of wet slate, and they pinned you where you stood. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his voice was a gravelly rumble that commanded instant, fearful silence. He was the one who turned the locks at night. You could feel his presence outside your door, a shadow blotting out the thin line of light from the hall, followed by the definitive clunk of the bolt. One Tuesday, during a particularly thrilling session of watching birds at a feeder, I saw Mr. Clay and Mrs. Harlow in hushed, intense conversation by the French doors. She was nodding rapidly, her doll smile gone, replaced by a pinched, anxious look. He was gesturing, not angrily, but with a sharp, stabbing motion toward the floor. Toward the basement. I followed his gesture and saw, just for a second, a symbol chalked on the flagstone patio outside. A circle with a jagged line through it, like a bolt of lightning in a cage. Before I could make sense of it, a sparrow flew down, and when it took off again, the symbol was smudged away as if it had never been. That night, the humming was different. It was sharper, edged with a discordant whine that set my teeth on edge. And it lasted longer. 23 minutes. When it stopped, I heard a new sound. A soft, wet, dragging sound from the hallway. Like a heavy sack being pulled slowly over the Persian runner. It paused outside my door. I held my breath, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. I heard a slow, deliberate sniffing at the keyhole. A low, guttural click, like a stone being turned over in a wet throat. Then, Mr. Clay's voice, closer than I expected, right outside my door. A harsh whisper. "Not this one. It's not ripe." The dragging sound moved on. I didn't sleep. I sat in my hard-backed chair until dawn bleached the sky gray, understanding one thing with crystalline clarity: the locks on the doors weren't to keep us in. They were to keep something else out. And sometimes, Mr. Clay let it in. The next morning, Millicent from room 12 was gone. Mrs. Harlow made a gentle announcement at breakfast that Millicent's family had come for a surprise visit and taken her on a little trip. A ripple of knowing, fearful looks passed among a few of the sharper residents. Ben wouldn't look up from his plate. His hands were trembling. I had to get out of my room at night. I had to see. I'm not a brave man, but the not knowing had become a worse prison than the locked door. My father was a watchmaker, and some of that patience with tiny mechanisms had passed to me. Using a paperclip, the spring from a pen, and a sliver of hardened plastic I'd secretly carved from a cafeteria tray during creative arts, I spent a week fashioning a shim. A simple latch lifter. The deadbolt was the problem, it was thick and new. But the old original lock beneath it, that was a simple Victorian tumbler. I could pick that in my sleep. The following evening, I pretended to take my sleep aid, a chalky pink pill, holding it under my tongue until the orderly left, then spitting it into a tissue. I waited in the dark, the homemade shim cold and slick in my hand. At 9 p.m., the shadow came, the clunk sounded. I waited another hour, until the only sound was the groaning of the ancient pipes. With sweat-sticky fingers, I knelt at the door. It took longer than I'd hoped, my old fingers fumbling in the dark, but after a few agonizing minutes, I felt the final pin yield. The old lock turned with a satisfying, heavy click. I took a deep breath and pushed. The bolt held fast. The new, silver deadbolt was still engaged from the outside. My heart sank. I was still a prisoner. Frustrated, I pressed my eye to the keyhole. The hallway was dark, lit only by a single, dim nightlight at the far end. And then I saw it. The silver deadbolt on my door, it wasn't fully thrown. Mr. Clay, in his nightly round, had engaged it, but the mechanism hadn't fully seated. A quarter-inch of shiny steel bolt was visible, not fully sunk into the strike plate in the doorframe. A sliver of chance, I looked around my room. My eyes fell on the wire coat hanger in my closet. I straightened it, leaving a small hook at one end. With painstaking slowness, I fed it through the old, larger keyhole. I had to work by feel, the wire scraping against ancient brass. I hooked it around the shaft of the silver bolt. I pulled. It didn't budge. I pulled harder, my breath coming in short gasps. The wire bit into my fingers. I braced my foot against the door and heaved with all my frail strength. With a muffled snick, the bolt retracted. The door swung inward an inch, silent on well-oiled hinges. The cold of the hallway washed over me. It was the cold from the walls, but alive, moving. It smelled of damp earth, ozone, and something else, something sweetly rotten, like forgotten flowers. I slipped out, closing the door softly behind me. The hallway was a tunnel of darkness. I crept along, my slippers whispering on the runner. I didn't know what I was looking for. Evidence. An exit. The source of the humming. I found the service stairs at the end of the hall, the ones the orderlies used. They descended into even deeper blackness. The humming was faint now, a distant tremor. I followed it, my hand on the cold plaster wall. Down to the second floor, past the silent common rooms with their shrouded furniture. Down to the first floor, through the empty, echoing dining hall. The humming grew stronger, leading me to a door I'd never seen open. It was in the back of the pantry, a heavy, steel door that looked utterly out of place in the Victorian pantry. It was slightly ajar. A wave of that sweet rotten smell poured from the crack. And the humming was loud now, a physical pressure in my skull. I pushed the door open. It wasn't a basement. It was a descent. A modern, steel-grated staircase spiraled down into the earth, lit by harsh, intermittent fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered. The walls transitioned from old stone to raw, excavated earth, shored up with wooden beams that looked ancient and slick with moisture. I was in a mine shaft. The history flashed in my mind. The town was old mining country. Birchwood Manor was built right on top of it. The humming was deafening. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it vibrated up through the soles of my feet. I descended, step by trembling step. The air grew warmer, thicker. The sweet rot smell was overpowering, mixed with the tang of metal and a smell like a storm about to break. The stairs ended in a cavern. It was vast, the ceiling lost in darkness. The space was lit by strings of industrial work lights, casting a garish, jumping glare. And in the center of the cavern, it was a machine. But like no machine I'd ever seen. It looked almost organic, a tangle of pulsating copper pipes, glowing glass spheres filled with swirling amber liquid, and great iron pistons that drove up and down into pools of shimmering, silvery mud. Wires, thick as vines, snaked across the floor and up the walls. The humming was the sound of this thing, this leviathan, operating. It was alive with awful power. And around it, connected to it, were people. Residents. Dozens of them. In various states of connection. Some sat in chairs, wires trailing from temples to the machine, their faces slack, eyes open and glowing with the same amber light as the spheres. Others were partially submerged in the silvery pools, only their heads and shoulders visible, their skin gleaming with a metallic sheen. I saw Millicent. She was in one of the chairs, but she was different. Younger. The deep wrinkles around her eyes had softened. Her thin, gray hair seemed thicker, darker. But her expression was one of vacant, open-mouthed bliss. This was what happened to the ones who went on a trip. Fascinating, isn't it? I whirled around. Mrs. Harlow stood there, her usual neat bun slightly disheveled. She wasn't smiling. She looked tired, exalted, and utterly serious. Mr. Clay loomed behind her, his arms crossed, his stone face unreadable. What is this? I stammered, backing away. The next step, Arthur, Mrs. Harlow said, her voice echoing in the cavern. For too long, we've seen old age as a decay. A winding down. We were wrong. It's a concentration. A distillation of life's energy. All those memories, all that experience, it's pure potential. We're just harvesting it. You're killing them. No, she said sharply. We're repurposing. The machine, Arthur. It's a translator. It converts the psychic energy of a life lived, the pain, the joy, the love, the loss, into a stable, physical form. A bioelectric essence. Do you know what that's worth? To the right people? Corporations, governments, men who want to live forever but lack the spiritual mass. We provide the raw material. They get an infusion of life. And our residents, they get to contribute. They get to feel useful again. And in the process, they experience a bliss no drug can provide. Look at her. She pointed to Millicent. Is she suffering? Millicent looked peaceful. But it was the peace of an empty vase. And the thing in the hall? I whispered, the memory of the wet dragging sound making me shiver. The sniffing at my door? Mrs. Harlow's composure cracked for a second. A flicker of fear. A side effect. The process isn't perfect. The conversion releases echoes. Residual psychic forms. Hungry ones. They're drawn to the strongest sources of untapped energy. The unripe, as Mr. Clay calls them. Like you, Arthur. You're full to bursting with life. You're a beacon to them. The locks are for your protection, your monsters. We're pioneers, she corrected. And you, Arthur, are now a participant. Mr. Clay. I turned to run, but my old legs were no match for him. His large hand clamped over my mouth, his other arm locking around my chest like an iron band. I kicked and struggled, but he carried me as easily as a child toward a vacant chair next to Millicent. "Don't fight it, Arthur," Mrs. Harlow said, her voice softening to its former, fake gentleness. "You'll feel no pain. Just a gentle letting go. You'll be helping so many people." I was forced into the cold, metallic chair. Mr. Clay strapped my wrists and ankles with leather restraints. He produced 2 wicked-looking needles, connected by clear tubing to one of the machine's pulsating spheres. The amber liquid inside swirled eagerly. This was it. I was to be drained, my essence bottled and sold, my body left a hollow shell wearing a look of artificial bliss. As Mr. Clay brought the needle toward my temple, I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped fighting. I went limp. And I thought. Not of escape, but of my life. Not the happy memories, but the dark ones. The crushing grief when my wife, Eleanor, died. The bitter regret of words unsaid to my son. The terrifying, lonely nights after her passing. The black, sucking void of despair. I focused on it, wallowed in it, summoned every ounce of that painful, negative energy that Mrs. Harlow had called pure potential. The machine's hum changed pitch. The sphere at the end of my tube, which had been glowing a steady amber, flickered. A wisp of black smoke swirled within it. A warning klaxon sounded, deep and resonant. "What's he doing?" Mrs. Harlow snapped. "His readings are spiking erratically." Mr. Clay hesitated, the needle an inch from my skin. I poured more into it, the shame of failures, the acid of grudges held for decades, the profound, existential terror of the quiet I now understood. The machine groaned. The pistons slammed erratically. The lights flickered wildly. "Stop him. He's overloading the intake," Mrs. Harlow shouted. But it was too late. I had opened the floodgates of a lifetime of sorrow. The machine, designed for a balanced mix of a whole life, was choking on the concentrated dark. The sphere connected to my chair turned an inky, angry black and began to vibrate. And from the darker shadows of the cavern, beyond the work lights, they came. The echoes. They were indistinct, shifting forms, like heat haze given intent. They had too many limbs that scraped against the rock, and mouths that were only gaps of deeper darkness. They made that wet, clicking, dragging sound. They were drawn to the energy, but this wasn't the clean, ripe energy they sought. This was a spoiled, toxic feast. They shrieked, a sound that was the hum of the machine twisted into agony. Chaos erupted. The echoes swarmed the machine, not to feed from the residents, but attacking the pipes and spheres, repelled and enraged by the corrupted energy I was pumping into the system. Glass shattered. Amber and black liquid sprayed. A pipe ruptured, spraying hot, silvery mud. Mr. Clay threw himself in front of Mrs. Harlow, batting away a tendril of shadow that lashed at her. "The failsafe," he roared. In the pandemonium, my restraints must have been damaged. One leather strap sprang loose from my wrist. With a strength born of pure adrenaline, I wrenched my other hand free, then fumbled with the ankle straps. All around me, the connected residents began to stir, their blissful expressions crumbling into confusion and dawning horror as the machine's connection to them sputtered and died. I didn't wait to see more. I stumbled from the chair, slipping in the spilled fluids, and ran for the stairs. I didn't look back. I heard Mrs. Harlow screaming orders, Mr. Clay's roars, the unearthly shrieks of the echoes, and the growing, catastrophic groan of the dying machine. I fled up the steel stairs, through the pantry, through the silent, sleeping house. I didn't stop until I was back on the 3rd floor, outside my own door. The silver bolt was still retracted. I slipped inside, slammed the door, and leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Silence. Then, from deep below, a sound like 1,000 windows breaking, followed by a deep, subterranean whump that shook the entire manor. The lights went out. All of them. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, and more terrifying than anything that had come before. In the pitch black, I heard the doors. All down the hall, the clunks of the silver deadbolts disengaging. One by one. A mechanical sigh of release. Then, the new sounds began. Whimpers. Cries. Confused, frightened voices calling out in the dark. The voices of the residents, waking up, truly waking up, for the first time in who knows how long. And under that, another sound. From the depths of the now quiet mine. A slow, wet, dragging. And a hungry, guttural click. The echoes were no longer contained. The machine was broken. The locks were open. And the quiet of Birchwood Manor was gone forever.